Welcome to Developing the Leader Within podcast, the podcast that brings you leadership insights from the brightest minds shaping our world. Join us as we dive into conversation with trailblazers, innovators, and change makers, spanning every corner of the globe. Get ready to explore new perspectives, gain actionable insights, and become the leader the world needs today. Unleash your potential. Tune into Developing the Leader Within podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Let's embark on this transformative journey together. Developing the Leader Within podcast, leading beyond limits.
Welcome to International Month on DTLW podcast. If you haven't subscribed, please do so right now, as it'll help us get our show to others and help us get to our next milestone. Make sure to catch us streaming on Parade Deck, on Roku, and Amazon Fire TV, on the Purpose Place Network, and catch our exclusive members-only content, Going Deeper Within, on the Lions Guide Academy. Today, we are speaking with Anthea Stevanovic. Anthea is the director at Intelligent Directions. She helps improve your business by focusing on three key elements: business efficiency, business strategy, and business growth, and personally tailoring intelligent direction for your businesses. Anthea, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's our pleasure to have you, and I'm looking forward to what you will be discussing through this episode. And folks, we will be speaking about stop guessing, start growing, smarter strategies for business success. But before we get into that conversation, tell us a little bit about you.
I've had Intelligent Directions for going on to 9 years now. Before that, I was a business consultant working in a firm. And then before that, I was in management. So I've been in management since I was 15, starting off my career when I was 13 at McDonald's, and then worked my way up to become a shift manager when I was 15. And then once I finished school, I went into retail and was managing a menswear retail store for about 5 years, where I also did some cluster management, so managing another store whilst I was studying. And I studied a Bachelor of Business and Commerce, and I majored in management. So kind of all ties in. I had a really big drive and motivation to want to help people and contribute to the world. So before I started my business degree, I was actually studying a social work degree, and my aim was to work with women and children. And what I realized during that degree is it wasn't exactly the way that I wanted to the path that I wanted to take. And naturally, I was really, really great at business, great at managing people. And that was something that I wanted to pursue. So I switched degrees, and I had obviously a lot of experience already, even at that young age. And so that's kind of the path that I went on. In terms of me personally, I kind of had a very entrepreneurial spirit. I grew up in a family business, and I knew that I wanted to work with family businesses. I wanted to work with small to medium, predominantly family businesses, because I felt that I could impact more in those types of businesses. But with my husband, we've been together since we were 16 years old. When we were 20, we started renovating properties. And so together we've renovated and flipped 8 properties, done a bit of property investment as well. And more recently, I renovated a retreat and opened a retreat with my family, which we're now looking to sell. So yeah, lots going on in my world.
Wow, I love the diversity in all of your fields, but that you started so young. And there's a lot of
Yeah.
people that are looking at new careers older. And the younger I've noticed here lately are very entrepreneurial. They are trying to get a quicker way to the cash by doing things, but and flipping homes. What an adventure there. And I do hope that you get a buyer for your retreat. I know that's going to
Thank
be
you.
exhilarating for you. Well, let's talk about business, right? And there's
Hmm.
this thing called business efficiency. And by the title, right? Stop guessing. And there are ways that businesses can be efficient. So, what are the most common inefficiencies you see in growing businesses, and how can leaders quickly identify and correct them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the biggest thing, well, the biggest reason clients, potential clients come to me is that they've recognized that something in their business is not working. Generally, it's they've hit a ceiling, and I talk about this quite a lot because in business you're going to hit that ceiling multiple times. And for me, the ceiling is kind of the gap between the business owner's knowledge and experience and where their next level is, where they need to go. Um, but generally, what happens is a business starts out, and it starts in the field that the business owner has studied or is good at, for example, trade. And they start their business and they gain success because they're really good at what they do, but they actually don't know how to run a business. And this is a really big problem. Most people that go into business actually don't know how to run a business. And so that's probably the root cause of most of the inefficiencies. But what I find at that first kind of ceiling is that the business owner does everything themselves. So they may have hired staff, but they're the bottleneck. So every order, every directive, everything comes through the business owner. They don't have anything documented. So there are no policies, there's no process, there are no systems in place or very little. And so the business owner is either giving every single directive or they're constantly repeating themselves on the same directives. Um, so what is happening is that bottleneck, and that's creating the biggest inefficiency. And when you're in that position, you can't grow any further because there's only so many people that one person can manage, right? There's only so many conversations you can have in a day. There's only so many times you can say the one thing. And so they're kind of stuck at that point where they're probably busy enough to bring on more staff, but they can't because they literally can't manage them. And so the answer to that is creating the policies, creating the systems, creating the processes so that you have a business that isn't reliant on one person. It's actually reliant on the processes and the systems.
And that is so key. Folks, if you're a business owner, you are leading the charge. You cannot be the bottleneck. Don't be that person, please, because you have a lot more to worry about than being that type of person. And growth, you mentioned growth, business growth requires strategy. So let's talk a little bit about what that looks like when developing a strategic direction. How do you help
Mm-hmm.
business owners align their short term actions with their long term visions?
I actually love this question because when I started my business, one of the biggest things that I saw is that not only wasn't there real strategy in small to medium and family businesses, there wasn't even goal setting really. And even if a business did set goals, they rarely achieved them. And this was a problem that I kept getting or becoming present to and getting feedback on was the fact that the business is kind of just operating day to day. There wasn't a long-term viewpoint. There wasn't a strategy. There weren't goals set, or if there were, they weren't achieved. And what I actually did was I developed a management system and I implement this management system into businesses. And what that does is it covers a few key areas. So the first area that it covers is creating the strategic direction, setting goals that will actually be achieved. And I have a specific methodology around that. And then creating the systems, the processes, the policies. So I create an organizational chart which documents how the business runs, all the roles, all the responsibilities. And then from that, we actually document every single responsibility by creating policy, procedure, forms, checklists, whatever is needed for a person to be able to perform that responsibility. I document it. And so that's kind of the management system overall. And the reason I'm talking about that to answer this question is that goal setting is a really important part of this. So the way that I do it is to make it very, very tangible, very usable. I'm not into creating anything for the sake of having it. I actually hate having too much documentation. Everything that I document in terms of policy is very simple, very easy to follow, because I'm thinking of the end user. And in terms of setting goals that are going to be achieved, the way that I set up my strategic direction is we start as far away as the business owner can see. So we generally create their big picture goal, their ultimate goal, their big, hairy, audacious goal. We look at the purpose, why the business exists. We look at their values and document their values. And they're kind of the guiding posts for the direction of the business. From there, we either create 10-year goals if they can see that far, or 5-year goals, and then we work it back to the present moment. So we'll do 10-year, we'll do 5-year, 3-year, 1-year goals, and then we do quarterly goals. So each quarter, we actually set the quarterly goals, which are in alignment with the yearly goals, which are then in alignment with the 3, the 5. So you have this progression all the way from the furthest point that you can see all the way to today. But the key thing that I do, which is a little bit different, is with our quarterly goals, we actually break down each goal to an actionable step. And then we put that on a to-do list, and we run weekly management meetings with the executive team every single week. And the idea is to ensure that the goal breakdowns, the steps that need to be taken to achieve those goals for the quarter, being looked at on a weekly basis and being worked on. And they're being integrated with business as usual. So a lot of times businesses will do a management meeting and they're just dealing with the problems that are occurring. They're actually not integrating their management meeting or the management team conversation with their strategic direction. Those two things are separate. And that's why we see that goals don't get achieved, because there's no integration with what's happening on a day-to-day basis. Once you do that, you naturally then start to achieve the goals.
Absolutely.
But it's something that I'm very passionate with, because without that guide, that strategic direction, and when a lot of the time when business owners think about a strategic direction, they think it's this big scary thing. They actually don't know. When I went to university and I studied my Bachelor of Business and Commerce, and I thought that I would be taught how to run a business. I thought I would be taught a basic thing like writing a business plan. And my degree didn't cover that. So there's this kind of mystery around strategy, around business plans, strategic directions for, I think, a lot of business owners. So having something, a methodology that's really easy to follow, that's not this kind of big scary thing, makes it real to most people, and also makes it something that's achievable, that's attainable.
And it's eye opening that educational institutions wouldn't have the basics, right?
I
Which
know.
are so key to growth, because you can have your goals, but if you don't know how to implement those key, simple, foundational things, right?
Yes.
Like a business plan or things of that nature, it makes it a little more difficult to run a business or even scale a business. So, as we're talking about scaling, business growth. Now, what
Yeah.
key mindset shifts must a business leader make to move from survival mode, as you have mentioned, hey, people don't know what they're doing, to sustainable growth mode?
These are also really good questions. Your questions are fantastic. Um, I think there's a very key thing here which I have observed time and time again. And it's funny that you use the word survival mode in terms of the business, but I find that this is directly linked to where you're at as an individual in terms of your nervous system. in terms of, are you personally operating from survival mode? Are you operating from your woundings? Are you operating from your blind spots? Right. And where I see the biggest struggle in businesses is around the leader, and the leader operating from those places as opposed to operating from a very grounded, a very neutral place where they can see everything, or mostly everything. When you're operating from survival, when your nervous system is dysregulated, you don't make the best decisions. You can't see everything because you're in this kind of turmoil all the time. And so the biggest advice I would say is to start working on yourself first. How are you being? Where is your head? Where are you thinking from when you're making decisions? And that will filter through into the business. The business is you as the leader. And everything that you do or say, the way that you're being, your behavior, it impacts the results of the business.
And it's something that we often don't think about, that our business growth is inherently tied into our own ability to grow, right? If we are not in a state of mind to facilitate growth within ourselves, we'll definitely be that bottleneck that we spoke about earlier for
Yeah.
everything, because growth is not part of the DNA at the time. And we
Mm.
definitely have to keep that in mind. So thank you for bringing that up. Folks, get right personally so your business can be right. Now, you run this thing called intelligent direction, and I love the way you phrase that, because there's many ways to go somewhere, but not
Hmm.
all of them are intelligent or wise, right? So you mentioned creating a unique, intelligent direction for each business. What are the essential components of this approach, and how does it differ from traditional business plans?
I think, yeah, it's funny, intelligent direction. So I think for me, I like to take the shortest, most efficient route to get anywhere. Some people may may call that laziness, some people may call it efficiency. I naturally, when I look at things, I can visualize the whole process in my head. When I document a business, I can see all of the workflows like a map in front of me, and I'm documenting from that viewpoint, so I can see how everything works together. And that's kind of where intelligent directions came from, that concept of creating the most efficient way of doing something. When I'm looking at a business, I start off by doing an audit. So I audit the whole business, I audit all of the different divisions, and it's a conversation between myself, the business owner, and any key managers within the business. And during that audit, I'm asking a lot of questions to get to understand the business and then to tailor a recommendation. And sometimes what I do is not the right solution. Sometimes a business doesn't need systemization, doesn't need process, doesn't need policy. The two key things that I do is the systemization and then looking at the people and integrating the systems and the people. And if that's not their fundamental issue, I will find out what is and I'll refer them on. So it may not be that I'm the best solution, but in terms of the work that I do the audit, I get to understand the business, and then I make my recommendation. Generally, most businesses, when they start working with me, we start at the same place, which is my management program. It's called the Business Booster Program. It goes for between 12 to 24 months, depending on the size of the business. And during that process, we create the strategic direction. We create the company structure. We document all of the roles and responsibilities, all of the outcomes. So everything that I do is about producing the right outcome at the end of that work. So we look at that for every single role. We create KPIs. We create a way to measure every single person. Then we create all of the documentation. So we document every single responsibility in the business so that at the end of that work, every role has a handbook. The business has its own handbook with policies and procedures, documentation around how we expect everybody to operate. It's setting the foundations of or the agreements of how we work within this business. And then every single role has a handbook. So when we hire somebody, we can onboard them with all of their policies, their procedures. They understand what their role is from the beginning, and they have the guide to actually perform their role. So yeah, in terms of how I work, that's generally the way that we do things. And then from there, it becomes really apparent as we're working together what the other key things that need to be addressed are. Do we have a gap around managing? Do we need some management training? Do we need some leadership training? Those two things are actually very different. A lot of people think that being a leader is the same as being a manager, and it's not. Do we need to upskill your team? Do we need to do some team training? Do you need help with your hiring? I also have a hiring system and methodology that I use that looks at hiring people based on their ability to produce results. So there's many different services that I offer, and that becomes clear as we continue to work together.
And I love how intricate you get to, and how you marry up the role to the strategy of the business, and then complement those, because they often don't. I've seen
Mm,
a lot of positional descriptions that say what the person does, but it never ties them to any of the goals or any of the strategy of the business. And I've come across those and have questioned as well, hey, where does this person reside in this big scheme of things?
mm.
And so I love that you do that, because the results are to enable a business to thrive. You want to be able to go from goals on a paper to action and goals achieved, so that you can thrive in business. And talking about thriving in business, in today's fast changing business landscape, what habits or leadership practices separate thriving businesses from the stagnant?
I love the use of the word thriving because that's a word that I use a lot, and it's it's the ultimate goal of why I do what I do. It's to enable not just the businesses to thrive, but if you have a thriving business, you then have somebody, the business owner, who is thriving. There's a flow-on effect to their family, their community, the people they interact with, all of the staff, and then that flow-on effect. So for me, it's very important to have really strong, independently owned small to medium businesses across the world, because we're the ones that have a say on how things are and what can be created. So in terms of how do we ensure a thriving business, number one, having all of the foundations in place, the systems, the processes, the right things to ensure efficiency and a place for you to build off. But then something that I mentioned before is around the business owner themselves. How are they being? Right? What is it within you? Because a lot of people don't realize this is something that I'm really passionate about, getting this message across, is that everything that you have in your own life, every individual, it's a product of their creation. You've either done something or not done something to produce that result. And when I say this to people, some people get quite offended because they think, well, I'm sick. How did I create that? And there are some things that you can't create. For example, me, I have a lot of health issues. 4 years ago, I was actually totally paralyzed from the neck down. I was uh, quadriplegic, and I had to relearn how to do everything. I had to relearn how to walk, how to do most things. And I had a choice in that moment to either do all the things that I needed to do to get better. And I refused to believe that I would stay like that. I refused to believe that I would end up in a wheelchair. And I'm not saying that this works in all in all aspects. Obviously, I didn't have a spinal injury that would have been meant that I couldn't, but it's about the viewpoint. It's about the way that you're being with things. And there is an element of control that you have, not necessarily over what happens to you, but the way that you respond, the way that you view that thing. And that is what's going to produce the results in your life, right? So your viewpoint, your attitude towards things, the impact that you let something have on you is going to produce the result. It's going to produce the experience that you have. In those moments, I could have chosen to be very, very negative and um, to not do anything, or I could have chosen a mindset that was positive, that was empowering, that enabled me to get through that time. So that's just a really, really small example. But in terms of not just having a business that thrives, but a life where you're thriving, it's around you. You actually have the ability to impact everything.
Yeah, that's so powerful because as you were speaking, I remember during the pandemic years, there were a lot of businesses that thrived, and there was a lot of business that went under.
Mm,
And the key ingredient in all of those scenarios was the leader, the owner,
yes.
and their perspective and their outlook, their mindset, their determination, their ability to pivot, and all the rest of the things that we've learned since then that were critical moments of decision that those individuals took in order for their company to continue on serving the public that they were in business to do so, right? So,
Mm.
very great perspective there and comments on that. Now, I know that you were part of a book, so let's talk a little bit about that and give our audience an opportunity to, take a gander on that. But what do you have coming up, and where can the viewer or the listener follow or support you?
So I'll talk about the book first. I actually have it right here. I am prepared. It's called The Lost Art of Being Human: A Leader's Guide to End War. And basically, this is a collaboration book where lots of different leaders in different sectors got together and were talking about, from their perspective, how can we change all of the systems that exist in the world? Because right now, the world probably isn't the best that it could be. There's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of anguish. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of things going on. So what can we do as individuals? My chapter is actually on pain. It's pain, the lost art of well-being. And I write a lot about my experience in life and the pain that I've experienced. That paralysis was just one thing. I've actually been paralyzed over 100 times. I live with it every single day. I can be paralyzed at any moment and have a seizure-like episode. And it brings with it pain. It brings with it a loss of um, ability to care for myself, so many different things. And my perspective comes through in my work around, not being able to control what happens to you, but being able to control how you respond to it. And in essence, that creating your reality, that creating your world. So I actually have another collaboration book coming up. I'm um, part of a community called in Genesis. They have what's called the Being Framework and a lot of other tools, which I know, Rika, you are as well. I'm a certified Being Profile practitioner as well. And I'm currently starting the process of writing a book around the integration of people and the systems. And I'm writing that with the founder of Genesis, which is really, really exciting because that for me is the fundamental of my work. You can't just have one or the other. You can't just put all your focus into the people, and you can't just put all your focus into the systems and processes. We need to be effective at integrating those two things to have effective businesses. So that is coming up. I'm also personally working on a book as well, but that's a little bit more vague in terms of what it's going to be. But my goal is to have that out in the next couple of years. In terms of where you can follow me, I have a free community on the Ingenesis platform. It's for business owners, and you can join that community. It's the Intelligent Directions business community, where I share a lot of tools, different things to help you in business. You can submit questions, you can interact with the rest of the community. So there's that, and then also my website, and I'm quite active on Instagram as well on my personal page.
Well, folks, we will have all the links attached to the video and the show notes so that you can support Anthea and all her work and future endeavors coming up. It is wonderful to have spent this time with you and have you share all that you did. Folks, today's episode is sponsored by the Global Trends Magazine, the Outlier Project, Fantail Services, Southern Sweet and Sassy Coffee, Ascend Meditations, and Chop AI. And if you've enjoyed this episode and learned something interesting about the topic covered today, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and let us know by leaving a comment. Tune in next week for another episode where we dissect leadership from another angle. And as we like to end the show, success to you.